For the past week, the world's attention has been focused on Italy and the crippled cruise liner Costa Concordia. That sad turn of events has made us look homeward toward our own growing cruise line industry. Our region has made a huge investment in the cruise industry, building ports, attracting corporate giants like Carnival and Disney, and catering to the tourists. But with the stories coming from the coast of Italy, how will this industry be affected? What will this mean for our region? And just how safe are these floating skyscrapers? Tonight, we'll be cruising for answers. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Joining us tonight are Lydia Westbrook, Director of International Programs and lecturer, Conrad N. Hilton College, University of Houston. Condé Nast Travelers' world's leading large ship specialist, Tom Baker, President, Cruise Center, and Captain Alistair McNabb, College of Business, University of Houston Downtown, and former President of the Greater Houston Port Bureau. Welcome to all of you. I do want to start off by reminding everyone that if you'd like to join the conversation, you can do so on Twitter using hashtag Houston8. And once again, welcome to all of you. There's been a lot in the news, and we keep hearing news stories of what's going on down there. And Tom, let me just start with you and say, how safe is this industry?
Well, honestly, Ernie, I've been cruising for 45 years, been on over 200 cruises, and while this tragedy is shocking to me and continues to remain so, I think the industry has a pretty safe track record. Last decade, 100 million cruisers left out of the United States and worldwide ports, and there were 6 safety-related fatalities prior to the Concordia. So I think if you look at the evidence, safety has been pretty measured and pretty good in the cruise industry, at least over the last decade.
Lydia, how will this news, this recent turn of events, affect the industry, do you think?
Well, I think there's going to be some short-term effects, but in the long run, I'm not so sure. Certainly all of the cruise companies will be re-examining their safety plans and things like that. As far as the bookings go, right now there's no evidence of a sharp decrease in bookings. Only time is going to tell. A lot of veteran cruisers out there realize that this may be just an isolated incident. This may scare away some people that have never cruised before, but overall, I think the industry is pretty resilient, and it's not going to have a long-term debilitating effect on the industry overall, is my opinion.
Okay, and Captain, as you hear the details that come out about the accident in Italy, do you just cringe? Are there things that just are so wrong here?
Yes, I think the ship was obviously built to the latest safety calculations and is operated with all the necessary equipment to satisfy international laws. But as usual with these things, there's a human element involved, and I think we can worry a little bit about the aspects of management on the ship, and whether or not the management is something that they should be proud of. And the worrying stories about the captain's dereliction of his responsibility, I think these are questions that are the main ones to talk about when we think about the Concordia.
The part that fascinates me about the accident itself, and we're still getting details of what exactly happened, but I've been in cars that have little back cameras that tell me, and they have little beepers and sensors if we're getting close to things. Here you've got this massive ship and these rocks. I mean, how is there not a system there that's telling you through beeper or some kind of sonic something to tell you you're near an object? How can this happen with the technology we have today?
Well, the ship has, of course, sounding machines, and I believe they even have sideways sonar and front-facing sonar, so they can see what's coming up in addition to what's round about them. Maybe none of that is mandated, but all the modern ships have got all the best things that can be put on board in order to make them as safe as possible. But if you're in the wrong place, none of that will do any good.
Right. Oh, Tom, you're nodding. Talk.
Well, I agree, and I was on a ship in Alaska 2 years ago on the bridge with the captain showing us all the safety equipment and a group of VIP passengers. And while we were on the bridge, all of a sudden we heard this beep, 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 and everybody stopped. All the navigation people started scurrying about, looking through their binoculars. We all ran to the window to look to see, thinking we were going to hit a boat or something. It was quite stunning. The captain came back 2 minutes later and said it was a log floating in the water. So they do have incredible systems in place that monitor virtually everything in the water. So my thought process on this is this captain, through negligence, clearly, and even though I don't want to make all the judgments because the facts haven't come out, he admitted he careened over this rock. I think it was a rogue move. He wasn't paying attention. He was entertaining other guests on the bridge that have now come to fruition. And by the time those beepers went off, the front of the ship had already passed. It was the back end of the ship that actually hit the rocks. It was probably too little too late at that juncture. And a ship of that size going 15 knots, which is a little more than 20 miles an hour if I'm not mistaken, can't just suddenly stop or move quickly. He was not paying attention to his own duties.
And I don't want to belabor this much longer, but let me ask, and of course my vocabulary is nowhere as close as any of yours as when you were dealing with cruise ships. But as I understand, there are bulkheads down below. When something like this happens, when there is a breach of the body of the ship, you can seal off areas. The way this accident happened, was it impossible to do that? Or did they just not do that, or wasn't the ship equipped? Help me understand, because I come from the school of thought that these things are built in such a way that these kind of accidents will not happen today.
Right.
Well, I think as far as the subdivision of the ship into watertight compartments is concerned, the ship was fully in compliance with the regulations, which means that doors can be shut very quickly if there are any access doors through watertight bulkheads. But you see, this the big hole appears to have come into the engine room, and what has become the problem on the ship is the ingress of free-flowing fresh water. And there's nothing will ruin a ship's stability more than free-flowing water in a ship. That's why roll-on, roll-off ships invariably turn over as soon as even a small amount of water gets on the car deck. That the water rushing into the ship would just screw up the ship's stability. And that's where the problem lies. That's where I think ultimately we'll have to get investigation. The captain's issue is an issue in itself because that is connected with public relations and the passengers and safety and all that. But as far as the ship is concerned, she's a 3-year-old ship. She's pretty well brand new, and she's one of a large group of ships that are built in roughly the same style. The fact that the stability was compromised so quickly by an inrush of water, that's where the questions will be asked, I think.
So then this could lead to not just re-examining, but the way in which we structure these ships, because obviously we have found a flaw, or am I looking at it too much of a knee-jerk reaction to a single incident when basically you look at, as Tom was saying earlier, the sheer number of ships that go out, the sheer number of dings and bangs they get probably through their regular working where nothing ever goes wrong.
Right.
Are we going to overreact to it, or is it something that definitely needs to be examined? Lydia?
Well, it takes several years to, these ships' plans are planned out several years in advance. And so I don't think there's going to be any technical changes necessarily.
Not quickly.
As far as the building of new ships or changing dramatically the way they are built. The captain clearly went off course. They had been going through that channel for hundreds of times.
Yes.
And so I believe that going off the course is really what happened this time, and the negligence, without knowing again as everything is coming out. But he clearly went off course.
But yeah, Tom.
Adding to that, though, I read a number of stories, and people have said if you put a hole in a ship large enough, it's going to sink. When you look at the size of the hole that was torn in the ship, regardless of those watertight compartments, which, as Captain mentioned, are built to keep the ship from sinking, this may have been too much, frankly, when you look at the size of the hole in the ship. And perhaps there were breaches in other parts of the vessel we have yet to see since it's submerged underwater.
Right.
That's a possibility as well.
You see, the hole that we know about, the big hole, is in the biggest compartment, which was the engine room. So that was the maximum amount of water that could be rushed into the ship in the worst possible place.
Right.
Because when ships go aground, one invariably thinks of them going aground in the forward end. This was 2/3 of the way down the ship, and just forward of the stabilizers, so that the whole place is vulnerable to and a very large space to be filled up with water.
And I do want to pull this out a little bit from just this conversation, but before we leave that part of it, to talk a little bit about the number of casualties there actually were. When you think about the sheer number of people on the ship, it's sad for any loss of life, but it's relatively small if a similar thing had happened in an airplane or other means of transportation. And I'm wondering, do we look at the success of the way that people were able to get off the ship? What if the same accident had happened further out at sea? Would we have seen much more casualties? Was the crew well trained? Do the people that come on these ships, you know, we have to have a muster drill at the beginning, and that's where they tell you about the safety precautions. Do those have to be re-examined? What can we do to offset something like this happening again?
Well, you have to consider that this kind of accident wouldn't have happened out in the open sea to begin with. So it was the rocks and the going off that way.
Yes.
So I think the whole industry is going to again re-examine the safety and so forth. But it still is a ship, and it's going to be vulnerable out on the open water. But comparing to how many millions of people take cruises every year, yes, the fatality rate is minuscule.
It's quite small. The other thing is, people have criticized the crew for panic and the chaos on board this particular event. Having been on a number of cruises, most of the people that help out in these emergency situations are the room stewards, the waiters, the busboys, the bartenders. Everybody, the entertainers, have a role in facilitating the evacuation of the ship. I believe due to perhaps insufficient managing the process of evacuating the vessel, the timeliness of this all taking place, and the fact you had literally 4,200 people all trying to evacuate the ship in very short order. It's remarkable that this took place in the manner that it did, and the people made it ashore relatively safely, even given the panic in the videos we've seen on television. I call it truly a miracle, from my estimation. I would have been scared to death had I been there.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about the industry now. We have made a strong commitment in this region to bring cruising in. Talk a little bit about why we did that and how it has benefited us.
Well, I think you guys can talk about the cruise industry as a plus factor as far as Texas economy is concerned. So why don't you answer that question?
Well, after September 11th, there was a proliferation of cruise ports built around the country, getting away from the from the fly cruise market to the drive cruise market, and Galveston has reaped a lot of success from that. I know a lot of Tom's clients, 80%, 90% drive into Galveston. It's good exposure. It's been it's had some positive economic impact for Galveston. And
some people talk about that and ask if it turns out to be more like gambling, where people will come to a casino but will spend all their money in the casino and then they leave. Do we find that the cruise industry being in Galveston really has been a boost economically to the region? What do you find?
It has been a boost to the region. We were debating that earlier. There are a lot of statistics out there that I think numbers get kind of skewed between true fact and where the numbers actually lie. I believe, just from all the experience I've had here with the market, most of the people drive in, park their vehicle, spend, as we talked about the captain, $84 to park, and they drive out. So they may stop at McDonald's or stop at a La Quinta along the way and spend the night, depending if they live in Dallas or San Antonio, or coming even from Louisiana. But do people actually spend that time in Galveston? It's unlikely. The boom to the market has been in the port charges and fees that are added by the taxation from the cruise line. They have reaped benefit from that financially, from the provisions of the port that are coming in from all over Texas, from the crew actually going ashore and spending their dollars at all the stores buying their own local provisions. I think there's probably a greater gain there than from the actual tourism factor itself.
The figures vary depending on who you're talking to, and also whether we're talking about direct expenditures versus generated or induced, what kind of multiplier effect is really at play there. I would say that some people are going down there, staying overnight, and then also there's the exposure of, Galveston. maybe I'll come back on a regular land-based vacation and bring my family here. There's enough to see there, but it is a little bit hard to nail down exactly how much they're spending outside of parking, whether the hotels are reaping all the benefits of the packages that might have been advertised to them to begin with.
You see, the cruise companies want to be here because the most successful cities in the United States last year were Dallas and Houston. So this is where, comparatively speaking, the money is, and the people who have money to spend live. So being able to service that business through Galveston is a plus for the cruise lines. That's why they come here. But also it's an advantage to Texans in general. San Antonio, of course, we've got to add into that, because we can drive to Galveston, and we think of Galveston as a good launching point to go to the various places. But it is a limited market because we can't go to many places at all. We go to the same places all the time, and all the ships go to the same places.
Right.
So we've reached perhaps the limits of Galveston as an attraction, unless we go into a 2-week cruise or something that, a change of program.
But and I would almost say, from my view of the industry, that the industry recognizes that, and so that's why they're building these more exciting ships. So the whole point isn't necessarily where you're going; it's just being in this floating resort, basically.
You're right. The ship becomes really the destination. Hence, Carnival putting the brand new Carnival Magic in the market. Royal Caribbean bringing a newer ship, Mariner of the Seas. And Disney bringing in a ship. So this speaks
Which is also
volumes.
called Magic?
Yes.
Which I think will confuse everybody for a while.
It is.
Now, I had read somewhere that in 2012, what we're expecting is that 100,000 more visitors will come through our port because of these new ships and these improvements, and that they were estimating that would be about $10 million more financially felt economic benefit in the area.
Undoubtedly, the Port of Galveston, which is owned by the Galveston City, will benefit from it in port fees and everything else, and all related businesses attached to servicing a ship. All of that will bring in money into Galveston. So there's a basic basic advantage built into just the ships coming there. Never mind what the customers or the passengers may bring to the place anyway. So the additional ships mean more revenue for the city of Galveston, and that's good. That improves the economy of the city.
And I want to talk more economy, but another thought that just popped into my head is, with the widening of the Panama Canal, will that change what our ships do, or is that just...
Oh, absolutely.
What are we thinking there?
I am very excited about this because right now, only a Panamax ship can actually go through the canal. It's a ship of a certain width. With the new Panama Canal, the largest ships in the world will be able to cross the canal. So you'll see ships even like Queen Mary II that would be able to go right through the canal. To me, it's a good news, bad news. The old Panama Canal was unique because it was historic. It was built during a time when it was an engineering feat. Today, technology has advanced hugely. So they're taking some of that, what I call the charm of the canal, because it's going to be widened hugely all the way through, perhaps away. It'll be easier for ships of all types, from cargo ships to
So what would that mean for the cruise industry here? Would we be cruising through it more, or
I think
is it
more
the
ships
time
will
of
go
the
through the
distance
canal
still really would?
for sure, because the big ships now have to circumnavigate South America, taking usually 60 to 90 days to do that. Wherein now a ship can do 14 days through the Panama Canal, have easy access to Hawaii, Alaska, the West Coast, and points even across to Asia. So this is a huge benefit to the cruise industry, clearly.
See, one of the attractions, one of the principal attractions of cruises has been the two coast cruise, where originally, before the big ships came out, the number of ships went from the east coast to the west coast or vice versa, especially for repositioning, which was the reason that they were going from one coast to the other, depending on the seasons. But it's actually a smashing way of cruising, because you get through the Panama. The Panama is still going to be exciting to go through, but you can also stop off at anywhere in any of the Central American cities, or maybe north of South America, Colombia, Venezuela, and that satisfies the Jones Act, so that all these foreign flagships could actually go from Miami to Los Angeles by stopping off at some other port on the way and not be breaking the Jones Act law. You see, foreign flagships cannot go between one American port and another American port. So that kind of business is off to them at the moment.
Talking about flaggings of ships, too, just so we understand it, too. Carnival, which owns the ship that was in Italy through owning other companies, is a Miami company, correct? They're a U.S. company, Carnival?
Miami-based corporation,
It's
yes.
Miami-based,
Okay,
but it's
but
not.
then their ships aren't flagged Miami. So explain how that whole situation works.
Well, the corporation is actually Panamanian, from the Republic of Panama and England. It's what is it called? Carnival Cruise Lines and PLC, so that the Carnival Cruise Lines is domiciled in the Republic of Panama and also in London, England. So that the corporate structure is fairly opaque in a way, and they in turn have all these subdivisions. Like the Concordia is operated by
Costa Concordia.
Costa Concordia, which is an Italian company, and there are various other ones that belong to the same group.
Lives in Florida? What part of this corporation
the
is
marketing.
The home office, the marketing, the management of all
But
of
it's not
its
a U.S.
companies.
business, or it is?
It partially is, but primarily it's an off-seas business, as are all of the cruise
All of them.
lines.
Exactly.
All of them.
Which means that they're
Except
not paying,
Disney.
they're not subject to the same corporate taxation.
Except
that-
Disney, I hear.
Except
Yeah.
Disney.
Except Disney.
So is that something we should, in the industry, be looking to bring into our marketplace, in the U.S. marketplace, or are we comfortable with letting these companies be where they are at?
You know, there's a couple foods of thought. I would like to see greater preservation of U.S. assets. To me, it makes sense, but from a business standpoint, I understand exactly why they do this. Looking at cruise pricing today, when you can cruise for 7 nights on a very, very fine ship for under $500 per person, in not always, but many cases, they couldn't do that if they were being taxed under U.S. rule. There is no possible way cruise pricing would be attractive or generate the type of business that it has. But conversely, it's created millions of jobs in the United States for people of varying capacities in ports, tourism, commerce, as you well know. So really, is it a trade-off? Perhaps. I think there's more business that's created still, and you can speak to that very clearly on the tourism side out of the U.S. than, or even international ports of call, than maybe the disadvantages of this offshore corporation.
But do you see that? I'm thinking, look.
Well, the Cruise Line International Association, they themselves say that the cruise industry generates about 340,000 jobs. And so that's generating, and that's what I was talking about again before about the, where are those figures coming from? So there are the ancillary, businesses that are relying on the cruise industry. Would they be doing something else if the cruise wasn't, the port wasn't there or the ships weren't coming in? So I would differ a little bit about the millions of jobs versus even the cruise line saying generated jobs. So, compared to the lodging industry, which employs 1.8 million lodging accommodation workers, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics, the actual cruise industry direct American jobs are fewer compared to other industries.
But it is hundreds of thousands, though, if not millions, because there's a tremendous supporting structure involved in managing cruise ships, just the same as there's a tremendous American presence in operating all these international container ships. Because there's no American container ships, but we are the principal importer and exporter of the world, and there's a whole army of people who are involved in import, export, logistics, and all these sort of things, the railroads, the trucking companies, all of these things. It's the same with cruise lines too. They support airlines, and they support bus lines, and they support the marketing people. There's a tremendous number of marketing people involved just to keep cruise ships full.
Yeah, because I'm assuming, especially if you've got the Magic down there, the 2 Magic ships coming in, that simply the people that are going to fly into the region to go on those. Yes, I know a lot of people like to drive, but a lot of people are going to fly in to take these cruise ships and stuff. And so that's kind of, I don't know how you count those dollars out to
It
the
might be
impact
difficult
it has.
to attribute
Can I add to
them.
that, though?
Yeah.
And Lydia, forgive me, I was wrong on the number, but I read somewhere recently it was over $1 million, because if you looked at how this really played out, not just the direct attribution of jobs to the cruise industry, but when you get down to the actual provisioning of the ships and the people who are milking the cows and getting all the way down there making the milk to come, it really ties into a huge, huge number.
You know, people laugh when you say the milking the cows. I just saw somewhere in my research the statistics of the amount of food consumed on a ship in 1 week.
Oh,
It's
yes.
huge,
And so you think about the industry
Mass.
that is taking care of that way too.
It's all there.
I hope that we don't have to gather again on a subject like this, but thank you all for coming in. I hope we get together and talk about
we finished
the cruise.
already?
We are.
Oh
We have
my
run out of
goodness
time.
gracious.
Your cruise has come to an end. Thank you. Please
the
put your
cruise has
luggage
come
out in the hall before we're done. Thank you all
Oh,
for
thank
joining
you.
us. Each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org/Houston8. There you can read about the guests, learn more about the topic, and even watch past episodes. Next week on Houston 8, the U.S. Department of Education is partnering with HISD to increase awareness about the free application for federal student aid. And so are we. We'll explore the ins and outs of FAFSA next Friday night at 8 p.m. right here on Channel 8. And that does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week.
There we are.